Yeah, brown bacon.
Hi Nivedita, welcome to the groundbreaking. How's it going?
Hey, hi. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. This is a very cozy setup. Just really like the whole setup.
Thanks for that, Nivedita. To kick off the conversation, if you would, take us through your journey, what you've been doing, what you're trying to do, what's your role currently, a little about yourself.
I did my graduation in architecture, and then I thought that the next obvious step would be to do a master's in furniture design. So I went to apply to NID, got through. Did within the first year of NID, I realized this is not what I want to do. I still got an internship at Urban Ladder. I had to finish my internship in some furniture design related firm. So I interned at Urban Ladder, designed like a couple of furniture ranges for them. Then I decided that, this is where I stop as a furniture designer. I don't want to continue this further as a full time career. Then I really enjoyed those 2 years, had like a lot of fun. It was just, I'm really like really enthusiastic and passionate about architecture and furniture design. So it was like a nice exposure for me coming from Jabalpur. I did not get like a lot of exposure. It's a very small city. So design wise, there was very little exposure. So NID and then, Bangalore, the internship, all of that helped me really come out of my shell and explore a lot of things. I was really passionate about architecture and furniture design, so I got to explore that a little bit. But then I realized that this is something that I don't want to do uh, for my entire life. I also love sketching, just sketching. So I thought, let's also try something on the side. So I was freelancing as a graphic designer uh, while at NID and also while I was interning at Urban Ladder. So I had like a little bit of a portfolio as a graphic designer. Then one of my seniors from Urban Ladder, she moved to Swiggy and she joined there as the creative director. So she saw my sketches. She really liked what I was doing. She was like, "Okay, why don't you come join Swiggy after you're done with your internship?" So I joined Swiggy after my internship at Urban Ladder. Uh, was there for almost 2 years. Then moved to Ola for a year. Then the pandemic hit and the services had stopped, so there was not a lot that was going on at Ola. So decided that maybe I should try something else. So then the next thing that was booming during COVID was finance and fintech. So I moved to I applied to small case. I applied to like a bunch of startups, got through small case, really liked what they were doing. I also wanted to I did not know anything about finance, and I wanted to sort of challenge myself and learn like something new about a new industry. Like I had no experience of anything related to finance. I just knew what FD is. I had no knowledge beyond that. So then I applied to small case, got through. It's been 5 years now almost. So yeah, that's been the journey now.
Yeah, a lot of career hopping and a lot of you've shifted from one field to another. How difficult was this to, I think you make it sound very easy, but like how difficult was it to kind of shift from like a physical design job to like something where there was a digital product involved? How's that different, and what was the skill sets that you were owning throughout these shifts?
So one thing great about NID is that the first year is the foundation year where you uh, spend like a lot of time learning the basics of design thinking. And because I also had like the background in architecture, I knew how designers think. I had some idea. Um, but that NID, the experience at NID really helped me understand design thinking at a much deeper level. Uh, so irrespective of what field you are in, I feel like the basic design thinking tools are the same. Like you just need to know how to solve the problems creatively, irrespective of what tools you are using. So always, I kind of figure it out on the job, like the tools part of it. But I think like thinking differently or thinking creatively is something that comes very naturally to me. The tools part, obviously, it takes like a little bit of time to get a hang of. So, but it wasn't that bad. Um, I freelance. Um, I'm always doing something, learning something or the other around anything that is appealing to me. So when I was in furniture design, I was still um, freelancing as a graphic designer. So I was little used to the graphic design tools, Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. I could do it pretty well, much better than my the average peers that were there in my
Yeah.
school. So yeah, that's how I mean. Like I just feel
Yeah.
that the basic design thinking skills are the same. It's
Yeah.
just the tools that vary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very the beauty of design thinking and like design as a foundational subject. I think it makes everything very interrelated. I have studied as an industrial designer, and now I'm like in a digital space. It sometimes like it's you have to realize that a lot of time it's difficult to be a designer around physical products, especially. It's not just the ability of doing great work, but also the opportunity and like the scope. Whereas in digital product and like digital space, it's always evolving, and it doesn't take like a month to kind of build something. Very interesting. So I would like to. So you started as a furniture designer, just because you had your peers around and like the exposure that your college gave you. I'm sure you have like a great ecosystem around you. I'm sure you have amazing friends who are doing great jobs at doing great things. I would like to take a deeper look at your journey at Small Case. I think you said you started as a junior graphic designer, and now like like being like a person who's responsible for everything they're doing in terms of building their brand and stuff like that. How has it been for you understanding the business side? And I'm sure it's a fintech ecosystem, and I'm sure you had a lot to learn around that. If you could take us through these these years of navigating and becoming better and also adding value to your company.
So I did not know anything about finance when I joined Small Case. That was my challenge, that I want to learn something new in the industry. And when I joined Small Case, literally didn't even know what a stock is. Like, what do you call, what is a stock? What is equity? What is debt? Had no idea. Uh, the only thing I knew was fixed deposit. So literally, like when I joined, I had to learn everything, teach myself everything. So like there was like a nice onboarding session that they had, because a lot of people who join like in the roles which are not related to the finance teams, but like the business teams or some marketing. A lot of us come from like different background, right, which are not related to finance at all, and we have no idea of how this industry works. So the initial onboarding by the company really helped me understand like the basics. Okay, what exactly is a mutual fund? I know you invest in mutual fund, but I didn't know like how they are structured, or how they are created, what like how it functions basically. And I got to learn all of that. Now at least I can, now it's not like I can pick stocks for myself on my own, but yeah, I have like a decent understanding. I have a better framework. I'm very like now very confident, at least talking to my CA, at the end of the financial year. Otherwise everything seemed like Greek and Latin to me now. At least.
Yeah. Plus, you
Yeah.
have friends, I'm sure, amazing friends at your company who are like finance nerds. And I'm sure you're
Yes.
learning a lot from them.
Yes. So like I joined, and then the person who hired me was let go. So the I was the only designer in the team. So I got to build the team from scratch. I now we're a team of 9 people, and like it's very difficult to draw anything in finance, because there are very few tangible things in finance. Like like say if you're designing something for a food app, you can draw like a pizza or like a burger to show
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
on visually on the app. But when it comes to finance, especially like in equity investing or stock investing, there are no visual elements as such. what do you draw when I say the word, stock portfolios? What do you even draw? So it
Yeah.
was like a little bit of challenge to figure out what exactly needs to be made,
Yeah.
how to illustrate things for the product, for marketing. Um, there is like always a challenge that you can't really uh, sell things on, like you can't ask the retail investor to invest in like a certain product.
Yeah.
There are like compliance issues around it, so you have to nudge them,
Yeah.
but in a very creative way. So figuring out all of that, I started in the marketing team. I started designing social media and ads for them to um then gradually every year, every few months, the responsibilities, like I started understanding the product better. I understood the ecosystem it was in. Not that I know finance very well, like I can't speak fluent finance like the finance guys,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've developed some frameworks which help me understand what the what a particular asset class is, or how to think about it so that I can at least visually draw that thing. um I started in marketing. I was designing social media and ads for them. Then, every few months, as my knowledge grew, they added more responsibilities on my plate. So, after say 2 years in marketing and social media, they added like the founders decided that I can take on some product responsibilities also. So, a lot of the UI related work that you see on the app, part of the design system, is owned by the brand team now. Simultaneously, I was also building the team. I had no experience in building a team before this. I got the chance to build a team from scratch. We're a team of 9 now. And yeah, I mean, that's it.
Yeah. And I think it's the one thing that I've also noticed around fintech is you can't be too creative, right? You can't be
Right.
like super creative. You
Hmm.
can't do like a lot of things that's like a lot of storytelling,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Because a lot of people who are using your product maybe are like people from a very technical background,
Hmm.
finance bros who doesn't
Right.
understand design. So it just I think this also reminds me of this conversation that we were just like having before the podcast. um is that suddenly a lot of, not just fintech, a lot of tech brands are understanding or maybe learning the value of brand building,
Hmm.
right? And Cred is a great example. Razorpay is a great example. Considering, I think the product is very different from each other. Pine Labs,
Right.
Grow. They are heavily investing in design and brand building and stuff. Well, what do you think is the gap that they saw that they're trying to fill up? Now a lot of new brands are also trying to become like design led. What do you think was the gap when maybe they're trying to fill? What's your responsibility in terms of brand building? Because I think once they for a long time it was just like build a great product and brand will eventually get built. What do you think is the difference now, and why do you think it's super important, not just for fintech but for tech as well?
Um, so because a lot of products are in the similar space, right? Like, uh, say UPI is there by 3 4 brands, but I think brand building and design is what helps you differentiate the product. um, the user is able to build some relatable connection with like a certain kind of storytelling, and they automatically are driven towards that particular brand building. If the all the offerings, say for UPI apps of from all the apps, say Paytm and PhonePe and Google Pay, I mean the service is the same, right? So the only differentiator here is the brand. So it's only the storytelling which is helping bring in that differentiation, that oh, I like, say, how PhonePe talks about their UPI app. I like the kind of storytelling they do, how they pitch it. So I kind of like that. So maybe my preference is I always end up using phone pay a little more than say Google Pay, but the offering is the same. So I think it's brands are heavily investing in these because now they know that if they want to um, get that, find their people, they have to invest in storytelling.
Yeah, that's a super simple and very effective point. Honestly, like I didn't think of it. I mean, it's so simple that I didn't think of it. For example, like I can think of number of apps. Like I maybe use GPay over Paytm. I've seen a lot of people using phone pay over other apps, even for stock investing and stuff like that. Uh, so I think you made it you made it sound super simple, Nivedita, and how you've been navigating such a competitive and a tech and kind of a boring space to make it interesting. If I can say that. Um, what do you think about the ability a creative should have to work in such boring slash techie ecosystems? What do you think you were doing differently than maybe like looking at from a very creative designer's lens?
Okay, so say from my experience, my job at Swiggy was very chill. I love food. So, making things for food was very simple. There's less compliance. You can talk about anything. There are so many ways to be creative around food, but you don't have that kind of freedom when you are designing something or creating something for finance. So, you have to be a lot more strategic around how you are thinking of things in finance. Um, Again, like I said, a lot of platforms offer, in invest you can invest in different kinds of assets through multiple platforms, but small case is like a different niche. It has its own set of people who resonate with what the kind of brand it is and the kind of product it is offering. One good thing is that it was the pioneer when it came to stock investing or investing in like stock portfolios, ready-made stock portfolios. So um, it became very easy for them to differentiate themselves in the market because the product was very unique. It was not something that was being offered by any other platform. So they became the pioneers in that space, and that has been, like, I think, a big differentiating factor when it comes to like brand building and how small case does storytelling for itself. um Obviously, it's not the most creative space, but I mean, that's the fun, right? Like, if everything, like, what I think is like art has lesser constraints, and design, the more constraints you have, the more you are forced to think creatively around that constraint. That, okay, I can't
Yeah,
attack the problem this way, so I'll attack the problem this way. Like we were talking before the podcast,
yeah,
right? Like the Rapido bike thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you think creatively and you find creative solutions around it, and you figure out how you want to talk.
Yeah.
So sometimes we make an ad, for example, we have to put out an ad, but we can't tell the user to go directly invest in a particular small case or a particular mutual fund, for example. So you are creative about it. You build an analogy using a metaphor. Say that this portfolio is great for long term investing, or this portfolio is great if you want to invest in a certain sector. So you kind of make it a little more vague, and you kind of attack the uh, core idea or the root idea of that, that brief, and then you talk about it. So it's a different sort of a creativity. It's not really the most
Yeah.
um fun, like, not, oh, it's fun in its own
Yeah,
way,
yeah, yeah.
but
But you have
yeah.
to navigate, like you have to
Yeah,
come from a very painful space to kind of understand like what is the limit that you can go to. And
exactly.
not the limit. And I think it can be a little complex. I'm just like, so I'm only saying it from my experiences working with the fintech. A number of times we were too creative and we were like, dude, people who are our customers are not going to understand this, number one, and number two, like these are not designers that we are selling to. So it took us also some time to kind of understand the communication and the tone of voice. Is
Right.
that something that you also emphasize on as a team, as a brand team?
Yeah. Like, this is my observation in the industry after being in the industry for so long, that if you are too creative with finance, then you don't come across like as a brand which is, serious about your money. Like, say small case, if it is making a lot of joke, constantly cracking jokes, not sending out serious communication, not talking, with like a lot of data, and everything is like funny and vague, which, say like a food brand like Swiggy or Zomato has that liberty of. If we go down that space, people might think, oh, maybe, they're not seriously into investing. It is possible that, the user perception might come out as that. I want to create something, and, I'll create like a beautiful ad for you, but there is a chance that, someone might perceive it some other way. So you have to control the perception also a little bit. So you don't want to come across as a brand which, is too funny and is always like joking. So you want to show that, yeah, it's a fun brand, it's a creative brand. It's offering something unique, but it is also very serious about what it is offering. So you, instead of saying that we're a funny brand, you kind of think of it as it's a very unique brand. So you cater to different other keywords which are in that
Yeah.
space instead of funny. So and then you figure out, now I have these constraints. How can I uniquely tell my story?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. That's the fun.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, while you were saying all of that, I was just visualizing the amount of iteration that we have done in house as well. And I think it's as I said, you might be just moving your customers away if you're not communicating right,
Yeah.
right? And especially in a country like India, where I think people can be a little emotionally driven. Is that true? Is that something that you keep in mind as well?
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to add was that people in Indians are very value driven. Like, majority of the Indians, like, they're very value driven. Like, they want to, um, especially with finance. I think, like, they know, what kind of money that, like, I'm not talking about where you're spending the money, but where you're investing. You do pay a lot more attention when, you can't impulsively invest. You can impulsively buy things, but you are more careful or more thoughtful when you are investing. So I think that's where, because you're more thinking more when you are investing, or, trying to make decisions,
Yeah,
um you end up being more, I'm trying to bring in some value, or like, is this product going to really add value?
yeah, yeah,
Is it worth my investment? So I think that perception also, is there while
yeah,
creating a brand in finance, that I can't joke around a lot.
yeah,
I'm not going
yeah,
to come across as someone who actually brings in a lot of value to the table. So you you want to be friendly, but you want to be funny friendly, like fun friendly, but not, you know, funny that I'm joking.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, 100%. I think we definitely want like 3x ROI in everything, every penny that we spend. It's always a not just with the consumers, but also with businesses. They want to get out the maximum ROI as possible. Um, so I think what I've also been noticing is that there has been a little it's like a what I've been noticing is that it's about brand versus product. I've been seeing that a lot of brands have invested for the longest of time. They were avoiding the value of communicating consistently between brand and product. Now suddenly they understood the value, and I just want to know it from your POV that what how are you making sure that the communication that you're trying to do is consistent. I think you mentioned that a lot of the product UI was responsible, like brand your brand team was responsible for that UI of the product. How are you keeping it consistent. I actually have like a funny story that I've met like under one roof. They were like uh, bunch, like a bunch of dozen fintech designers. Half of them were a product, half of them were brand roughly, and there was something going on with them. And I think they were all like, one or the other person was thinking that brand was better than product, and the value of product is more than the brand and stuff like that. If you could talk a little about how are you kind of tackling this at small case, and otherwise outside your company, what do you think are the right way of kind of communicating consistently, or do you think it can have its own identity? And when I say identity, it doesn't mean visual identity, but also like the system.
Hmm.
Do you think a brand can have or a product can have a different identity systems than each other, or do you think like it needs to be hyper consistent throughout?
I mean, if it's consistent, it's good. But again, it's very difficult to actually do that on an everyday basis. Also, I mean, like it takes like a lot of effort to actually set up the entire process. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. Ideally, it's good to have, what the product is, the tonality of the product plus the tonality of the marketing. If they match, nothing like it. I mean, that's an ideal case, I think. But it varies. I mean, like company to company, how they want to tell their story. They want to be a little more creative on the marketing side, but less creative towards the product side. It's like a spectrum, and varies company to company how they want to differentiate. Again, like if everyone tries to be attacking the same space, then everyone will become kind of similar, right? Like the
Yeah,
storytelling for everyone will become very similar.
yeah.
So you figure out where you want to be on that spectrum, and how you want to, pitch your brand on product and this. So I think it's just a very, it depends like on brand, the kind of brand they want to build. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the pointers I think I was crafting before getting you on the podcast was I mean, like the value of storytelling and how it can elevate the design craft. Or maybe there was one example if you could share, and you mentioned appraisal emailer. Do you want to emphasize on that? What do you I mean, if there's a story behind it?
Okay. So one of the important things while building a brand is storytelling, and being a designer, it's like, it's always assumed that designers are only responsible for the visual storytelling. But in Swiggy, like the setup was such that, everything was a lot more uh, informal. Like, anyone can pitch in any idea. So within the creative team, the writers could pitch in something, very that was very visually driven. And even like the designers could pitch in some ideas which were, just copy led or story led. So we got this opportunity in Swiggy. Like this was around the time of April, I think March and April. The appraisals in most companies happened during that time, end of the financial year. So mm, me and a bunch of my friends, um, we all went out for dinner after work, and we were just discussing how would the appraisals be this time. And I just thought that the entire table was just like discussing appraisals. And I thought, if we are thinking and other companies are also having the appraisal at this time, what if this should be like a topical event then. um so I just thought, why not think of an idea around it. So we sent out an emailer, and this was in 2018. So in 2018, this was like Spotify Wrapped, before Spotify Wrapped was a thing. So we sent out an emailer to the users, and based on the number of orders that they had placed in the last financial year on Swiggy, they were giving like different designations. Um, like, director of deliciousness. So say if you had ordered 500 times in that last financial year, you were director of deliciousness. If you had ordered more than 500 times, you were the VP of gastronomy. So we gave them these, fake titles. Um, and we sent out, all of this was happening via an emailer. So we designed an emailer which had like an entire storytelling that, these were a number of orders, and it had some chart, uh, some pie chart around it. And then, there was that, this is the highest order. Sorry, this is the time where you order the most. So someone orders dinner the most. So we wrote it as in a very corporate like
Yeah.
jargon like term, like, your peak productivity is during dinners.
Yeah.
So we tried to see, how performance evaluations are done in companies. We tried to copy that jargon or that terminology thing into how, you would map it when you place orders on Swiggy. So based on the number of orders you had placed in the financial year, you would get these fake titles. And that kind of went viral on Twitter. um I like, I barely even knew Twitter. Like, I was not
Yeah.
like a social media person before that. So it just like overnight, like even the title of the emailer, and it was very story led. It was not very design led, like in the sense that it didn't have like great visuals and stuff. It was a very basic emailer we did within like 24 hours. We sent it out to like a large user base saying that, oh, like, based on the number of orders, you've been given a promotion, and some fake titles. And the subject line of the emailer read, your appraisal report is here. So because the appraisal report, and it was around the same time as the end of financial year, and people were very intrigued that why
Yeah.
am I getting a email from Swiggy saying that my appraisal report is here.
Yeah.
So it got like a lot of clicks.
Mm.
Within like, like overnight, it had some like within 2 days, I think it had some 22K retweets. It had like a 25% open rate. Um, it won some award also, I think, in some marketing event. Um, so yeah, I mean, like, it was purely story led. It had nothing really to do with like the visuals of design. And but it was just an idea which I thought was topical, and I converted that into something, and something that I thought would benefit story building for the brand. So because like a uh, food tech startup gives you that space to be a lot more creative,
Yeah.
and you could take the storytelling anywhere. I got that opportunity to explore this, so it was very nice, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Talking about Twitter and social media platforms, w- uh, I think at that time you said you were not a person on social media and you never used Twitter. What about now? Do you use Twitter? And also, one question that I wanted to ask. I've seen a lot of Web3 and fintech companies being very active on Twitter. What are the metrics for you? Just curious to know.
We have a different social media team, so again, not the right person in
Yeah.
sense of how
But otherwise as well, like in terms of consuming stuff, do you think like in terms of how are you consuming like the fintech ecosystem information and knowledge and what's happening around? I'm sure you are taking inspiration from a lot of brands or like maybe it could be cross industries or like how are you consuming data out of these platforms?
in for finance and fintech, like, I think YouTube works better for me, because I get like a lot of podcasts, and I'm subscribed to a lot of news channels, so I get like updated of what's happening in the industry. um but I think like YouTube works better for me. Generally, I try to consume a lot of information through YouTube and podcasts, videos, and and through LinkedIn, um, just to get an idea of what's going on in the industry, irrespective, because finance is like a culmination of every company, every brand that exists, right? Like, everyone's ultimately talking about revenues and numbers, right? So um, I try to consume information from that point of view, that yes, I'm learning about finances of other companies, but then I'm also like learning in general about the space in of the finance ecosystem. Um, Usually it's YouTube and LinkedIn.
Yeah. And like even for creating, so I think one problem, let's not say it has a problem, but there are not, I think what how we've been our industry has been evolving is like everything is like a first time for us as a country, like as a design ecosystem. Maybe 10 years ago there were no fintech. They were like people didn't even know what a fintech
Right.
could be. Like now it's like a even a like everyone knows what a fintech is, and like
Hmm.
a lot of startups around finance, and people are considering finance as a everyone's investing in stocks and stuff like that, so everyone have their like stack of apps and products that they use. So I think you also, I at least feel this way, that you also have a responsibility to kind of put a right benchmark as a company, because you don't maybe have a lot of examples around and in the country. So how are you kind of maybe pushing the limits, and how are you consistently being creative, and doing things that maybe have never been done, or maybe finding ways to being original. Just want to know your process and like your thought work.
So I think in the last few years, when like after the tech boom has happened in India, a lot of startups have come up in different industries in India. Uh, I think for finance, how it has worked has it has really uh, democratized finance, like different things within finance also. You are able to, like earlier, to without tech years ago, it was very difficult for you to figure out or explore so many options around investing. Now, because of tech, people are able to download an application and they are able to access it more easily. Otherwise, you would have to like, go to a bank or like, some um like a AMC, or try to figure out, how to do these things offline, which is obviously like a resistance. Like you have to take out time from your schedule and go visit a certain place, then figure out what is it worth investing your time, effort, energy in, and then you would take a decision, right? So I think because of tech, the friction has been reduced. Now everything is a lot more accessible to you, which is why like um this space is growing a lot, because people have so much more access. Like think of even UPI, like forget investing, like UPI. Like imagine if the world was still running on cash, everyone would be accessing ATMs a lot more frequently, because everyone would need cash at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Now you hardly go to the ATM
Yeah.
because you have UPI, because it has made your entire account a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
So tech has, I think, democratized the different parts of finance. Like it could be investing or payments or whatever it is. um that's the influence of tech in the industry. um the other part of your question, which was uh, the responsibility, right? Like yeah, I mean, like uh, there's SEBI, for example. There are RBI, and there are these government institutions which kind of regulate how you would be talking to the customer. How there are certain things you can't communicate to the customer. There are already so many rules and regulations by these government bodies, and finance startups would have to operate within these guidelines. So there is very limited space to actually talk freely, but you kind of figure out, like the loopholes, and you have to give the user a little bit of time. Like, for example, except UPI, I think, like because UPI is the simplest of products to understand. But say in the investing space, at least I feel like you have to give the user a little bit of time. Like a new user who doesn't know anything about investing, they have to be given a little bit of time to understand the space, that, oh, like, what is low volatility, or what is the, like, when should I invest, like should I invest during a bull market or a bear market. Like, it takes like a little bit of trial and error for the user to get used to the journey. You can, put out tutorials on YouTube. There are so many influencers and creators who are creating so much content around finance, which when you start consuming and once you get over the fear of, these terms which are there in the industry, it's actually not that difficult. Um, there are just so many new jargons which could be intimidating, I feel. But once you navigate that, like both from a designer perspective and from a retail user perspective, I think once you get over the fear that these are just terms and you understand the you mentally build a framework for yourself for it, you're able to navigate the space, at least take some decisions. You're able to have like better conversations with other people, who might, give you better ideas also. So it's not like you have to do everything by yourself. um you just need to know enough to have conversations also. That has something which has helped me really at work, because um earlier it was very difficult for me to, even ask a question, um because I would not know if I'm using the right term. But
Yeah.
as in, when, like, with time, learned a lot more about this industry, and now I'm able to ask my questions with like a lot of more confidence, and I'm able to get like a better answer for it, and I'm able to ultimately design better. So I think it's not that difficult. It's just that, just the you get used to the terms and
Yeah.
you'll be fine.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying it so simply. I think you made it sound easy, not just by explaining it well, but the kind of work you are producing. So one more thing that I've been very curious about is building teams. Now you are in a leadership team. You have a much more responsibility, and there's some set of expectation from the kind of work you are producing as a team. What kind of people you are maybe bringing to your team, like in your creative team? What kind of designers, what kind of creatives are you bringing to your team? What are the things that you're looking in them? Because it's not like, as you said, maybe if they have a very food FMCG kind of a background, they're probably not a right fit. Or what are your parameters to be like a to for a designer to be a part of a fintech team, say like a company that works around BFSI? What do you think could be the parameters and the stuff that you should look for in designers and creatives in your team?
Okay, I think it's more important for them to be well versed in design, or whatever creative field they are in. uh Ultimately they are going to do their job in the company, right? Like, which is going to be some creative role. So it doesn't matter what their background is, as long as they show some, uh like, they have a growth mindset, that, like, okay, fine, today I'm going to learn this. I have to figure out like some mental framework around this, um build something, and just, I mean, as long as they are able to um overcome that, fear that I come from this background, so I will only create this. Because I am no one to say. I have switched so many roles in my life that
Yeah.
I can't be the one to say that,
Yeah.
I can't hire you because you come from a certain background.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really think it matters. As long as people are curious enough to learn, they'll pick up the skill.
Yeah, and I think one hot conversation around design is also to be a specialist or to be a generalist. Uh, I feel that this is a generation for journalists, but maybe it was not like that. Uh, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I am also a generalist only. Like, I still, like, at home, whenever there is like some renovation that work that we are going to do, like, I still still try to, try and give my inputs in it. Me and my dad will figure something out. So like I still try and be involved in as many things as I can. Um, because it's just like design thinking. Like it's you are trying to solve a problem, the tool is different. That's it. So I think like having a generalist mindset helps like helps your career in the long run, because say if you're a specialist, yeah, that if there is like a if you specialize in a very very niche, like a software or like a very specific kind of work, then it's not, I mean, like, not all brands or all companies would want to work with you, because they might not need that kind of work. They obviously will like the kind of work that you are doing, but they probably don't have the need within their ecosystem or the kind of storytelling they want to do as a brand. They don't have a need for that particular kind of work. So they might, I feel it narrows your number of options, what you can do with your career. Being a generalist, it opens up more, opportunities for you. So, and the world is rapidly changing. Like what we were doing 2 years ago and
Yeah.
what we are doing now,
Yeah.
in just a matter of 2 years, the world has changed so much. So,
Yeah.
it's
Forget about 2 years, like 3 weeks, there's something
yeah,
changing, right? I've met so many, like I've had a chat with like so many CMOs and like people, executives. They're like I can't recall who said it, but one of these executive was like, now it's very hard for them to plan for the whole year,
right,
especially around marketing and like something that needs to consistently where creative inputs, and not just creative inputs, but the habits, the users habits, how rapidly they are changing. Product managers are deciding that we're gonna launch these features in next 6 months, 8 months, and now it's just happening in 2 months, and maybe they're just scrapping it. How are you? Are you facing the same thing, or how are you managing? Like, are you like do you have plans? Okay, do you have milestones? Okay, like in 3 months we're gonna do this. Then maybe in next 3 months, if this works out, how are you managing it? And do you think it's affecting you yet, or do you think it's manageable?
Uh, okay, so there are two answers in this. One is purely from a finance perspective, and the other is from a design perspective. So we've in the past we've worked on certain features and or product offerings where we're almost towards the end of the finishing the work for it, and like there is some compliance or some new regulation has come out from the government, and then like that project has gone on hold. So imagine like working on something for like almost an entire year, and then overnight there is like a new change in the some regulation, and then that project is on hold till you can figure out what is the workaround for it and how you can still take it live. So this has happened multiple times, like weeks before it is supposed to go live, something has gotten shelved. The entire product is ready, we're ready to ship, but some regulation thing completely out of our control has happened, and that project is now on hold. So that I mean, like, you have a lot of learnings from it, which you carry forward to the next project that you're building. That is one way to look at it. The From a design perspective, it's good to like I like thinking in systems and processes. So how I manage the team, how we've built like a system around it. Everything is done in a way, in a like a modular way, that okay, to if we are to suppose we are to build a feature, or like we have to build like a set of uh, we have to work on a set of deliverables for a particular thing. Tomorrow, even if you have to change, how we can still make use of most of it, and still obviously there would be some changes, because now like a new thing is going out, so there would be some new changes, but we try to have like a good foundation or a good base system, so that we can keep building on top of it, scale it in multiple directions. We have some processes around it for within the team. Our team is also structured in a way where it helps us navigate changes very quickly. So within the team, I have divided the team into generalists and specialists. So I know those specialists are only working on projects which do not have like a very short deadline.
Yeah.
they have more time to work on the bigger projects.
That's actually very interesting. Would love to know more about like uh has it been like that, or you saw an opportunity to kind of make it more effective if you divide like your team into like two categories or something? Really want to understand that more.
So that's the one of the first things that I noticed, that the kind of work that was coming in within for the brand team at Small Case, I kind of realized that these are the things which I need someone to work on, and I can't give them like a deadline, because there will be too many iterations, there will be like a lot of back and forth, there will be like a lot of feedback on these certain things, and I can't put them under like the pressure of like a deadline. So there are like a couple of people who work at a more chill pace, and they keep building things, they make a lot of iterations, and they are the ones who are building the base of the design system at Small Case. Then I have like a team of generalists who ship things very fast. So uh, one person is in charge of social media. So social media is something that is very topical, very event driven,
Yeah.
very fast. So now I know that the project which has like a longer shelf life or requires a lot more thinking is not getting affected by what's going on the social media side. Like that will still go on. So timelines, and in like our industry is like a very fast paced industry. Every there can be like like we have to be ready for a change any minute. Like there could be like a regulation, uh say at 12 p.m., and we will have to take out some communication around it by 3 p.m. We have to send it out before the market closes for the day. Now we have 2-3 hours to send out something. Now, because I know I have already like built a strong foundation here, I just have to figure out which assets I have to use. So a generalist person would come, put together that whatever the social media post or whatever the deliverable is, they'll put it together, because the other person, the specialist, has already created like a strong foundation or a base for the brand. So it's just then putting together the right set of elements and shipping out the thing. So this way deadlines are managed properly. Even if like people go on leave, I don't have to be worried, because I know that work is not getting affected, deadlines are still met. It's very easy to also just collaborate and ask people to pitch in for each other that way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely love that idea, and like how are you doing that? I think I'm just thinking about my team and like trying to like think of people like okay, who are the specialists in my team that I can run. Of course, we have to make processes and systems in a way, but as an agency, it's always difficult to like uh be consistent with different set of clients, right? Because
It's a
every
different ball game.
it's a different ball game altogether. But at the same time, I think subconsciously, I think I've been doing that with the team. A lot of folks are always like hyper energetic. A lot of these folks need more time, and they need like they like to follow a process where some of them are just always breaking it down and not following any rules. um Absolutely love how you're doing that, Nivedita. I I think the it's also what I've noticed is that how clear you are with what you're doing, even if you don't agree with that. What are the maybe habits that you're following day to day as a leader, as a designer, and what do you think has helped you throughout these years in your role and also like throughout your career? Some habits or some processes that you've been following,
So at
stuff like that.
work or like outside of work?
Both. Like I'm sure it's like interrelated,
Right.
because I think for a lot of people, work becomes their life, and I'm glad that you had mentioned because for a lot of people like me, I don't know if I have a difference between life and work, but like I mean whatever you are more I mean whatever you think is more valuable, because a lot of times the habits that we follow in our real life also affects in our work and makes us more productive sometimes.
Hmm. Okay, so like I'm also like a workaholic. I hardly take leaves. I hardly go on vacations. But like I do like my weekends. Like that's like a non-negotiable for me. I don't like working weekends.
Yeah.
I some things that I follow like very religiously. That's like following up on news. Um, this has happened only after I think I've joined Small Case, because I realized how much it was contributing to my work. Just being updated about the world, how quickly it was helping me understand things at work. Uh, that like I try to follow up on news. I read a lot. I try to detach myself from work. Also, I sketch a lot, so uh, I just love sketching.
Yeah.
So I'll, even if you give me like a napkin at a bar, I'll just you'll find me sketching.
Yeah.
People would have a whole ass conversation,
Yeah.
long conversation. I would be zoned out and like
Yeah.
I'll be sketching.
Do you think it's a design school thing? I don't know. Like in my case, like I think I hardly I relate to that so much. Because we were sketching all the time as a design student. Was it the same at NID? I'm assuming as well, or no? I mean, especially as a furniture designer, I'm sure you were doing a lot of perspective sketching.
Yeah, actually, like wasn't that great at perspective drawing. I found it very
Yeah.
like boring. I love making caricatures. So I actually have a side gig, like a serious side gig where it's called Glee Cards, and I illustrate. I do a lot of caricatures. So people reach out to me saying that, oh, like, can you please design my wedding card? So I've
Nice.
done like 85 odd wedding cards.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
85. That's a damn.
Yeah.
Were you part of all these weddings as well?
No, no. Some of them. So like that's a serious side gig, for example, and that has nothing to do with work. Like imagine just drawing a wedding card. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with work. But what it actually helps me with is like I get like a whole new perspective of what people think design is, because
Hmm.
they know that I'm a designer. They are reaching out to me via my Instagram profile or via LinkedIn also, that I know that you design wedding cards. Can you please like draw something for me? It gives me like and they are so, and the whole event is about them, right? Like they're talking about their wedding,
Yeah.
and the whole event is for them. So they are so, enthusiastically telling
Yeah.
that, can you make it like this? Can you, I want to
Yeah.
add this detail. Can you write something like this? So it gives me like a perspective of what like a layperson thinks design is. um I collect like a lot of unique weird uh things, and I have like a lot of unique weird insights from those conversations which I use at work. So, and that's not outcome driven, like
Yeah.
that's something I do for my own
Yeah.
like for my time pass.
Yeah.
Like,
Some sort of design feedbacks
Yeah.
from the. It's very interesting.
there's no ROI that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
measuring from it.
It's coming from a lot of emotions, so maybe you have very interesting feedback that maybe people are giving you.
Yeah, it's and the event is all about them and
Yeah.
their feedback.
They are the product.
Yeah, and so I collect like a lot of ideas which I then apply at work. So,
Very
but while
interesting.
I'm designing those cards, it has nothing to do with design as such. So, as in like my work.
Yeah.
So it's very independent of what I do at work. The designs are not similar looking at all.
Yeah.
So it's like a completely fun activity that I do on the side. I love making Legos. So it's like a very mindful yet mindless activity, because I'm like reading that Lego
Yeah.
book and I'm assembling the pieces.
Plus, it needs a lot of patience as well,
Yeah.
right? I think what I absolutely love, where I also can relate, is when you're doing stuff like making a wedding card or something. You are also kind of trying out different mediums.
Yeah.
Kind of trying out different processes of creation. And I think as a leader, you don't get a lot of opportunity to create, or do you?
No, I still take out time to do some hands-on work on a daily basis, because otherwise it's just it can become very mind numbing to just look at the product in one way. At least now when I have to do some hands-on work, a different part of my brain is getting used, which is like a nice break from the 40 other things that I have to do. So um, it on a daily basis, I take out time to practice something which is very hands-on. It
Mhm.
could be like sketching on paper. I love like exploring things on paper because it's very messy, the whole process of sketching on paper with like a pen or a pencil. And mm, it's it's messy, but it's very intentional. Like you're putting a lot more effort. Like when you are designing the same thing on a laptop, I feel um you're very careful. Like I have to make this line very straight. But on paper, I have the freedom. If even if the line is crooked, it will be fine. So even like it's it's messy yet a lot more intentional. A lot of my brain is more focused on where I'm putting the line. Otherwise, I'm dependent on the laptop to or the software to get the details
Yeah.
right. Um.
Yeah,
So
that makes
I
sense.
so I enjoy like exploring different things. Um. I try to cut away from work after like a certain point in time. Like I'd be like, okay, even though it ends up like being 10 hours, 12 hours of work certain days, but that's okay. Like that's once in a while. Um, but it helps a lot to cut away from what you do at work.
Yeah. Wow. Um, I absolutely love how you're simplifying your way of living with your work. I think which all of designers can learn and pick. Otherwise, I think burnout is something that's been very common, especially around creator. I think we've also been talking a lot about that. That takes us to the end of our conversation, Niveda, and I would would love to know your what do you think the future holds in terms of design with all the a lot. So now it's not only a space for food brands or all the fun brands to communicate creatively and to like make benchmarks and stuff like that. Now a lot of brands like Small Case, Cred, Razorpay are also trying to communicate creatively. What do you think is the future is gonna be for design and even for non-designers? What do you think is the value of creative communication, and where do you see yourself playing? What kind of role that you're playing in that world?
Okay, there are so many layers
Yeah,
to this. Uh, so I think, like I said earlier, that it is important to have like a unique story as a brand. Um, because at the end like all products will have like most of the products will have like similar offerings, so only it's like to find your own set of people. You will have to communicate in the way that they want you to talk to you. So I mean, that's something that I think is always evolving. Like few years ago, everyone was focused so much around millennials. Now everyone is focused around Gen Z. So like the
yeah, yeah.
terminology or how they think, that keeps changing, that keeps evolving. So there's always something new to do that way for all brands. Even your offerings could be the same, but the way you are talking to a different cohort of audience might be different. That's always evolving. So there's always something new to do in this space. That's one thing. Um, the second thing is what I feel is like people, like designers, not just designers, but like people in this like tech industry, like in different roles, like could be engineering, product marketing, design, whatever. Like they really need to like have more critical thinking skills. Um, in the sense that um, you need to think a little more deeper. What could be say the uh, constraints of a product, how would it scale, what could be the second order effect of this, what are the patterns that are getting created. These are like some things which would you know um these are very transferable and depend transferable skills or ways of thinking, and these apply to all kinds of brands. Like what I have learned at Swiggy, I sometimes apply it at Small Case, even though the worlds are completely different. But the patterns, or the way, the pattern formation thing might be very similar for both the brands. So like from a user perspective, so that I think, like, people should develop a little more critical thinking skills. And uh, and I think, like, it's always good to be, like, authentic to yourself. You should know what you want, uh,
Yeah.
generally in life. Be a little more self-aware. That goes a long way, because I think that's the unique factor, like with like, I think, like, AI coming in, like, it's very easy for people to generate very similar kind of work now, figure out what the prompt is, and like everything could like look very similar. But the only, I think, the unique differentiator would become the person who is behind the screen
Yeah.
and doing generating the prompt, or like working on a specific thing. So I think, like, try to make your thinking a lot more unique. That comes from how authentic you are to yourself. So try to align your goals, your personal career goals, whatever, uh, in how clearly you want to think in life.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Absolutely love the insights, Niveta. Thanks again for taking us through your journey and the kind of amazing work you're putting out. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation. I had a lot of fun.